I feel like this is such a long time coming.
What year did Dale and I come on your podcast?
Okay, I was
Pre-COVID.
thinking about this. Pre-COVID.
2018?
Potentially. We were in the Samsung studio.
I remember in meatpacking.
So I had the show going for like a year at that point. Then I was recording in that studio. Yeah, I think it was end of 2018. I'll look because I'll link it in the show notes. But
So like almost 7 years ago.
wait, what? Oh, in my head,
I
I'm
know,
still
everything
in
is
2020.
2020. I know.
Literally,
You're
when
like,
you
no,
just
no, it
said
was
that, I'm
4.
like, no.
Yeah.
Wait, that's fucking no, because I haven't been doing this show for that long. What year are we
Or
in?
have you? It's almost 2025.
Okay,
Ooh.
my brain is literally
Mine
thrown.
just broke. I don't know.
No, but no, you're right. Okay, wow. Anyway, was that the first time we had met though?
I feel like we had chatted prior to that because I came into it knowing that you and I had a shared love of Dr. Beth.
Oh,
And I was like, if this girl loves Dr. Beth, like we get each other and we love each other. So it was very easy for us to get on.
Shout out Dr. Beth. She was on the show.
Need to listen. Love her.
Love her. I haven't seen her in so long, but love her.
But also like a good sign for both of us that we haven't seen her in
haven't.
so long
I know.
because you know I was going weekly for certain periods of my life.
Well, this kind of gets into why I think we connected. Well, we must have. I obviously had followed you guys before, and we must have connected. I'm sure it was through Sari, honestly, like Sari and Dale.
Yeah, definitely.
And then we just became like friendly after the show. But then I feel like within the past year, maybe even less, it's been more like we've connected on different levels because we share many beliefs in our kind of woo-woo side of life.
Totally.
And we see a lot of the same practitioners.
Coincidentally.
And
some not.
And some
you know
not.
who I'm thinking of.
And now we see the same, like so many people in our lives are similar, and we've been doing the same like TBM work. And so I do feel like we relate on that, sure, but deeper, I feel we relate in that like type A, perfectionist, go, work driven, sensitive, and like just intense drive. Totally. And working on taking out some of those claws, but also figuring out like where it has helped us get to the place we are.
Yeah.
So a long time coming.
Totally.
All that to say.
And I'm so grateful that we've become closer recently.
Me too.
Because I really see you as a friend, and there's so much to not only just us being similar, but like I think as you go on in life and we all have friendships from different phases, it's really nice to have the friendships that are founded on current interests, you know, whether it's the To Be Magnetic work or mental health stuff or whatever. Like it's so nice. We were just talking before this about like being accountability partners for a manifestation challenge, and like not everyone is interested in that. You know, it's a little niche.
Dude, some of my college friends are like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
So we need those kind of people, both the college friends and the newer friends who can support the current interests.
No, I say this all the time. Like, friends serve purposes. And I don't mean that in a negative way.
Totally.
But there are people who I'm going to call if I want to go have like a fucking night out and have fun and do certain things. And then there are people who I call who I know I'll feel like you're just my sister and we're just sitting on the couch laughing. And then there are people who I'm like, I view you as an expander. Like you are an expander for me. I know we've talked about this. But someone who I know will challenge me and encourage me and then also inspire me. And I think everyone can do that, but in different ways. So when it comes to work, you definitely serve. That's one of the main rules you serve for me.
And
so,
same.
Thank you.
I really appreciate having you for all of the above.
I want to go back to the like sensitivity aspect of things. You talk a lot about being a highly sensitive person. And I'm trying to figure out for my own self, I am in certain ways when it comes to sounds, when it comes to touch, fabric, that kind of thing. In certain avenues, I am around other people, but in certain avenues, I feel like I'm definitely not. What was that like for you growing up? Like, when did you realize you were sensitive?
I mean, my mom would say literally from the moment I came into this world, like, I needed everything. I only would breastfeed. 0 bottles. Like, never in my life did I take a bottle. So, like, you know, I had preferences right away.
Yeah.
I had even certain fabrics would bother me at a very young age. So, like, I think, you know, nature versus nurture. I think I literally for me, it was a lot of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Now I also have two parents that are nurses that were very like nurturing and afraid of me being sick and all this stuff. So, you know, I'm sure it was bred into me a little bit as
Right.
well. But like, I think like I am just an innately very sensitive being. Smells bother me. I get headaches really easily. I get sick easily.
Mm-hmm.
My emotions are very sensitive too.
I
Like,
want to talk about the emotion side of things
because
that's where
do you not have that?
well, that's where I'm kind of, I don't fully relate to the highly sensitive person because, or label, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel it now in my life. I feel sensitive to things, but growing up, no. I was like, I don't fucking care. Whatever. Like, let's get in the ring. Didn't care at all.
So interesting. I mean, obviously, like, it's a scale, and I think it can change, right. And I think everyone's experience is going to be different. I wonder if that has to do with, like, you having multiple siblings and sibling order and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was the baby, so
yeah, I'm the middle,
that might
and I'm
also play.
Middle.
Yeah. I think there's so many different pieces to the puzzle. But yeah, for me, emotional sensitivity, big one. It shows up in friendships. It shows up in work. It shows up in my relationships always. My partners are always like, you're so sensitive. I don't know how to handle this. Because I am. And of course, I talk about this on social media all the time. I think it's also my superpower. It allows me to be extremely empathetic, sometimes a little too much. You know, I can, like, if a friend starts crying, like, I'm doing my very best to not start crying alongside them because I don't want them to have to start comforting me. But, like, seeing someone in pain, I viscerally feel it in my body.
How is that, like, how is navigating that in relationships? Because I imagine, like, let's start with friendships.
Mm-hmm.
When you're hurt, are you then vocalizing it immediately to your friends, or are you kind of like taking a step back and working through it on your own? Are you holding grudges? Like, how does that work?
I think I've gotten substantially better at this, thank God. But back, you know, years ago, and I'll refer to relationships too, because I think that's sometimes brings out our worst self, because we're our most comfortable.
Yeah.
But like, I would get upset about something and then not communicate it and then shut down.
Okay.
Which is like a terrible combination and really hard for someone to deal with when you're like stonewalling them and you're super sensitive and everything they're doing is under a microscope. I would say now I really try, as soon as something is bothering me, to communicate it and to share it as my experience. So I'm experiencing this, or like, I'm feeling this, rather than you did that.
That's a huge
and easier said than done. In practice, it can be a challenge.
Yeah.
But I really try to come from that place because that's how I would want to be spoken to. And that's how I would personally be able to empathize and understand another person, is to hear about what they're feeling, what's really beneath the surface, rather than finger pointing.
Yeah, that's a big thing that I talk about a lot with my husband, but then also on here, of like, when this happened, I felt XYZ, not you did this and therefore. And it's so much better received on their end of things. Like, they're so much more open to receiving that feedback or those emotions, when it's more so, I feel this way, less I can't believe you did that.
Yeah, and it's a learned language, right? Like, both in me doing it and the person on the receiving end, like, being able to translate it and not feel attacked.
Yeah, and it takes time. It takes so much time.
Yeah.
I want to talk about it being your superpower, because I love that you say that. I think it sometimes about my anxiety, where I'm like, it's allowed me to do so much. So like, I'll think of it as a gift. I don't know if it fully is.
Yeah.
But how do you think it's helped you career-wise? Because I look at you, and I know I've said this to you before, but as someone who's so magnetic when it comes to their career.
Thank you.
Truly. Like, sometimes I'm blown away by everything you're able to do, and I've told you this, but do you feel that the sensitivity plays into that, or do you feel other characteristics of yours have helped so much with growing your career?
I think it's a combo of things. I think with the sensitivity, it has really enabled me with the podcast more so than any other part of my career. It's enabled me to have really deep conversations, feel really connected.
Yeah.
And most importantly, above all, to connect to the community that's listening to the podcast.
It's huge.
And really share this part of me that has, and we'll get into this later, I'm sure, like, this sensitive type A overachiever personality that sort of was causing me to be chronically sick. I really think one of my purposes on this planet is to share that kind of personality and that kind of sensitivity can make you have these whack-a-mole symptoms long term. So I think that's a huge thing. That is one of my callings, and I'm so grateful to have experienced both the chronic conditions, the pain, and the sensitivity.
Yep.
On like more of a business standpoint, I think I'm gritty. And I
Agreed.
think that has been one of my biggest drivers. I was always really self-conscious, especially living in New York, about not coming from money. I never like had my parents' support after school. I graduated with a ton of student loans that I had to pay off myself. If that hadn't have been the case, and if I hadn't have had to like really work for literally everything I have, and I get so frustrated when people comment on my stuff and say, again, I'm sensitive, and comment and are like, she must have come from money or blah, 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 because like, I think being misunderstood is one of my biggest triggers.
Same here.
Ooh.
Not on that topic, because I did
Yeah,
come from money, but being misunderstood.
Being misunderstood is so tough because you just want to like, I want to like hold someone's hand and be like, I'm here with you and we're on the same team and this is what I'm really about. Not everyone gives you that opportunity, and I have to be okay with that. But I think the fact that a lot wasn't handed to me from a monetary standpoint, I realized that I come from a lot of privilege otherwise, forced me to work really hard to get to the city, to manage multiple jobs so that I could eventually quit my corporate job and do this full time. And then it's continued, you know, I have Sweats in the City, I have the podcast, I have Oro app. There's a lot of different balls in the air, but like I thrive off of being busy and doing things I'm passionate about and having to provide for myself because nobody else is.
I think that being misunderstood is a huge trigger for so many people, but it only but it really is magnified in this form of work.
Totally.
Because you are facing so many people who don't know you. Even if they're consuming every single aspect of your content that you're putting out, they still don't actually know the full picture behind the scenes. And it's something that literally within the past year I've journaled about so many times of I'm okay with being misunderstood until I can convince myself that I actually am. It's a mantra because truly we need to be. You cannot be understood by everyone.
Yeah.
And also not everyone has the privilege of understanding you. That's the other way I look
love
at
that
it.
framing.
Truly.
Yeah.
Like,
it's so interesting because I feel like a lot of people are bothered about not being liked, and ours is more being misunderstood because it's like,
I'm okay if you don't like me.
Me too.
But not if you don't like me over something that's not
that
real.
you're not understanding right.
I'm like, no, but you,
At least understand me and then be like, I don't like it.
I'm fine with
Fine.
that. If you understand me and you don't like me, fine.
Totally.
It's more so but you don't understand me. With the grit, I think we relate in many ways from different reasons for grit. It's interesting because on the reverse, I have the feeling of I need to prove that I wasn't handed everything. So that's where my grit comes from, of like having a coach when I was in 6th grade be like, you'll never understand hard work because you're not blue collar. And I'm like, well, what? Like I'm too young for you to be saying that to me.
Yeah, there's so much wrong with that.
So much wrong with that. But I think it also goes hand in hand with the perfectionism, because when there is grit, when there is determination, it can also tie into, well, then I have to do everything and everything has to be right so that it's well received or liked, or I'm continued to get this success at my fingertips. How do you feel now in terms of perfectionism? Like, where do you stand? Is that something you work to unravel yourself of? Because it's like a constant battle for me.
You know, it's funny because we were talking about our authentic codes before this, and we can talk more about that. But like, aesthetics and things like that are a part of what lights me up. And so it's both a matter of lowering the volume on the perfectionism so it doesn't impact me in a negative way, but also allowing for the things that like really please my eye or please my brain to exist, like, you know, having my apartment really clean and tidy and nice, or really caring about the outfit that I'm in. Like if I were sitting here in sweatpants right now, I'd be upset about it and it would be like affecting me.
Okay.
Because I like being put together and I like, it's part of my code, my authentic self. So I think that being a perfectionist has both helped and hindered me in different ways. You know, I can be really hard on myself. So that's one of the other downsides of being a perfectionist, because I pick myself apart and I've gotten a lot better, but I'm still not great. And I know that my anxiety always finds something. So if everything is good with work and my relationships and all of that, then it will be like, well, you're not good enough in this area, or your body is bad, or whatever it is. So I just kind of know how that works, and I see the perfectionism kind of floating around, and I see it for what it is. I think it's funny. I did a Patreon last week about like 10 things about me that might surprise you.
Okay.
And I was talking to someone about this recently who knows me really well. And, you know, as meticulous and perfectionistic as I am, I'm also like very loose in some areas, you know, like I barely cut the tags off of my shirts. I always have those little strings hanging on everything. Like there's certain areas where I like don't give a fuck randomly. So I think I have gotten a little bit better. I think anxiety medication helps.
Yes.
I'm
and
not
I
going to
get
lie.
into that. Duh.
Like that's, it's made me.
Because it takes that like microscope out where it's like obsess over this, obsess over this, obsess over this. And then it removes you. And you're like, oh, that actually doesn't matter.
Totally. So I've had a little bit more of a taste because of the medication of what it feels like to be like not as perfectionistic. And it's like really mind boggling that people live this way.
I'll be curious if you choose to have children, how that will impact that. Because for me, there was this like small period where it drove me to be more perfectionist, and then I just let go of it all. And it has allowed me so much to just give myself grace with the perfectionism and be like, well, you can't control it all, and I can control what I can control and move on and just ride the wave, because they test you in ways that you can't perfect, honestly.
I've wondered about that too with myself, and I think you're right. I mean, obviously I haven't personally experienced it, so of course your experience is a lot more interesting and valid. But I feel like it can go one way or the other.
Totally.
It can totally like tighten the constraints because it's something else to control, and arguably like the most important possible thing to control. Or you can let it be and learn from it and go with things, because at the end of the day, your child is absorbing so much of what you're doing and how you're treating them.
I think for me, it was like realizing specifically with my second that when I did the exact same thing, it was completely different, even just sleep being the example.
Right.
And that's when I really realized I don't control shit. And I can do the exact same schedule, the exact same feedings, all of the same temper, all of it. And one's going to sleep through the night and the other one is going to be up every hour. And that's just how they are.
Yeah.
In terms of children, is that something, are you comfortable having that conversation? Do you want kids one day?
I do want kids. I ideally want 2. I would love 3. I don't think it's probably in my cards just based on like finances and timelines. But Jamie did tell me I was going to have twins. So
no way. That's our psychic.
So our psychic. That's the group psychic.
Yeah, that's a group psychic.
Which we'll talk about, I'm sure. But yeah, so my dad is a twin. My grandpa is a twin.
Oh, so
I have twin cousins.
Okay.
I'm like riddled with twins. And I asked her, so I might have been leading the witness a little, but she was like, I see twins for you.
She told me I'm having a third, a girl. You know this, but I'll be so curious to see what happens. But Jamie has literally predicted so much stuff to the point of like, we were going to have a leak in our house. And then I flooded my entire basement trying to get nice hydrangeas.
The hydrangeas.
Like, are you kidding? No, but so many things that every time something comes true, we're like voice noting, like, Jamie said that this was going to happen. I go back to that note all the time of everything she told me. It's crazy.
It's really insane. And, you know, obviously you and I are both not closed-minded to that kind of stuff. But like, I didn't expect this level of accuracy. And it's really made me, it might sound kind of dumb to people that are listening, but it's really made me be like, there is a hell of a lot more to this life and out there, and just like like we're living in like the smallest of experiences when it comes to everything.
Well, I still need you to see Tiffany, my body worker, but I did a session with her yesterday, and we do it virtually now, and she's coming on the show.
Which is incredible that you do it virtually.
I don't understand. I truly don't understand. Like, I wouldn't believe it, but I do it. She's coming on. I forget. I don't know which episode will air first. We've done the interview already, but we did a session yesterday, and it was starting the spinal energy 2.0 healing. So she's like, this will feel different. You're not going to flail around like you do. Honestly, when we do the subconscious rewiring, your body's going to feel like it can't move. You're just going to feel like frozen. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about, girl? I was like, yeah, okay. All right, let's start. Lay down. There was a point in time where, I'm not kidding, I'm half, not asleep, but I'm in this meditative phase where she asked me if I heard birds chirping at all. And I was like, I couldn't tell you one song that was playing over my headphones.
Oh my God.
I literally kind of came to a little bit, and I was like, my body is frozen. I couldn't move a muscle if I tried. And that's where I'm like, there is so much more happening in this universe. The fact that this is occurring, well, you're not even in the same room. I still don't understand how it works. And even when she tries to explain it, I don't get it. But it's mind-blowing and so eye-opening. And I feel like that's where we deeply relate, because we're open to these things.
And not everyone is.
And I get it.
Respect that too. But I do feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm speaking about you, but like, I feel like we're older souls. Like I
Yeah.
feel like we've had a lot of lifetimes, and I believe that like at a certain point you become curious about what else is out there, right?
Absolutely.
Like I can identify certain people in my life where I'm like young soul.
Yeah.
And like bless, been there.
Like
Clearly.
they're fresh.
Yeah,
My
yeah,
3-year-old, old soul. He's lived
yes.
hundreds of lives, one of which I'm convinced was my grandfather's. But you can
You
tell.
should ask Jamie because
Oh,
like she
trust
said
me,
that
we talked
about.
about it.
She told me and my mom have been like sisters and twins, and like it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
But like you can also look at certain people in your family or your friends where you're like new character.
You're so fresh. You're so fresh and so naive.
Like-
No, 100%. You mentioned the timeline in terms of children. I want to talk to you about dating in your 20s versus your 30s.
Yes.
Because I have no experience to share. And
Right.
I like that feels so naive, honestly, because when people talk about it, I feel I don't have much to bring to the table in that conversation because I don't. But what have you seen the biggest difference be in terms of dating in your 20s versus dating now in your 30s?
It's funny. I just did a reel on this the other day because I was talking to Ariel Laurie about dating in our 30s. And I think the biggest difference, and this required active reminder to myself, and I'm not on a high horse about this, but I think the biggest thing for me was when dating in my 30s versus 20s, looking at the person that I'm going on a date with or seeing or whatever as I'm vetting you, you're not vetting me.
Oh, I like that.
Because in my 20s, it was like all about needing to feel others' approval. It was all about needing to get the text, whether or not I even liked them. I was just like, I wanted to be wanted.
I feel this all the time when my friends are talking to me. They're
do you
like, but
mean?
he didn't text me. And I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
well, do you want him to text you? Do you even want to go on a second date? And they're like, no. But I get it. I get the feeling of wanting to be wanted. 100% it's valid.
Yeah.
And like you want it to be on your terms.
It goes back to wanting to be understood and liked and all of the things. But I think in my 30s, it's been that. And it's also been like, I'm genuinely so happy on my own that anyone that I add into this mix has got to be adding value because I'm good.
Yes.
And I think people feel that when you're dating. I think there's an energy to that, talking about things we don't see or understand.
Yeah.
Like there is there's a magnetism about that. Because like I have friends like that are like, I'm good. And if I meet the guy, great. There's something about that energy and just like being on apps less. And I know that's controversial. Apps serve an amazing purpose. And I know tons of people that have met their significant others that way. But there's something energetically about just being good on your own. And again, easier said than done. That I think really attracts the right partner.
I think it's a mix, again, not speaking from experience, but being good on your own and still putting yourself in situations to receive. Because I think that it'd be easy to hear this, to be good on your own and then be more reclusive and not be in situations, maybe stay in more or whatever. But I think that is so important because I've had friends that are just like, I just want a significant other. And I'm like, but you don't just want a significant other. You want a significant other who can XYZ, because don't settle for just anyone.
Totally.
You don't want to just bring someone into your life because you want a boyfriend. You want to bring someone in who can help you do all of these incredible things and can support you and be there for you and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, of course. It's also like I've come this far.
Right.
I've like dated a lot of people in my 20s. I've broken hearts. I've had mine broken. Like, you know what I'm not going to do now? Settle.
No, absolutely.
So it's a different lens.
Not. But I also think that's your 30s in general.
Totally.
And
with
here
friendships,
with
everything.
40s also, it just keeps getting, you have less fucks to give. In terms of breakups and hearts breaking, what emotionally was it like for you to go through a breakup of a longer term relationship that was later in, or I guess in your early 30s when you maybe foresaw a future with that person?
Really sad and painful and tough. If I'm being honest, I think, everyone know. I don't wish the feeling of heartache on literally anyone.
Yeah.
And it did make it scary to date again a little bit, if I'm being honest, because I was like, I can't go through that again. I really can't. And it just made me a little bit more protective with my heart, not because of it being a bad breakup or anything like that, but just because I'm sensitive and I don't want to endure that kind of pain, but it also comes with putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
I think that after that breakup, I did a lot of work on myself. I went to Hoffman. I started living on my own right away, and I just started rebuilding and really focusing on building my podcast, and like maybe to a fault I kind of poured myself into work, whether it's self-work or like my actual job. But it kind of helped get me through that time and get me onto a positive path. And for someone who's a little bit of a control freak, feel like I had control over things. You know, finances are something that like are sticky for me in terms of like not growing up with a ton of money. So I'm always like saving and making sure I have enough to support myself, and calculating and keeping track of things, because it's just a pattern for me. So, you know, being present with my friends, doing the work on myself. I got really into breath work at that time. It was incredibly cathartic and amazing. Working on my healing. I was still like kind of like in my pelvic pain journey at that time. So it really allowed me a lot of like blank canvas space to pour myself into myself in a way.
And then do you feel like you got, I mean, I know this from being your friend, but do you feel like you got to a place then where you were open to receiving a new relationship, new love, new things in your life? Because I think that kind of what you said, when you are your best self and you're opening yourself to these opportunities, like that's when the universe has your back, whether you believe it or not.
Yeah, totally. I think that I did, of course. Yes. I think I'm very much in that place now. I'm very happy with my relationship status, which we spoke about more. I'm not going to go like so into.
Fair.
But yeah, I think it took a lot of work. It took a lot of like just patience with myself. None of it happened overnight. I certainly went on a handful of terrible dates. Some good, some bad, some not for me. And it's just part of the process. I get it. Dating, especially in your 30s, can feel really daunting. There is a timeline that is in the back of women's heads, whether we want to admit it or not. Like it's
biological.
There. And I would be lying if I said that that hadn't come up for me at all in this.
Of course.
But I also, at the end of the day, really trust in everything happening for a reason and ending up ultimately with exactly who we're supposed to be with.
I mean, I fully agree that everything makes sense at one point when you look back on it. It's like, well, that's why that happened, so that this opportunity could arise.
And you're like, thank God.
Thank God.
Happened. Yeah.
Thank God. I want to talk about the chronic pain because you've mentioned it, and specifically the pelvic pain. Like, what were some of the things that you were struggling with, and then how did you work through those and get to a place where you're not experiencing those symptoms anymore?
This is like my favorite topic.
So
and
buckle
I understand pelvic pain is pretty niche. So I want to preface by saying that I believe this applies to most chronic conditions that are like quote unquote unsolvable.
Okay.
So whether you're an IBS girly, or you have a ton of anxiety, or you have vertigo, migraines, I had pelvic pain. Like my pelvic pain is your back pain.
Okay.
Same shit, in my opinion. So I started dealing with pelvic pain in 2020. It was COVID. I was alone in my apartment in New York City.
Right. I remember you like were fully alone.
Girl, like I went multiple months without seeing anyone, including Dale, who was around the corner. I was too scared to see her. Wow. It was really bad.
That's scary.
I was terrified. It really played into my like fear of getting sick. You know, there was a while there where they said that COVID could be vascular. I have a pacemaker. I was riddled with fear. And I believe fear is one of the big emotions that breeds chronic conditions. So during that time, I started feeling like I had a UTI all the time, and I didn't.
The worst feeling.
Horrific.
In the world.
Horrific. Pressure on my bladder, burning, like the whole thing, but no UTI. So I started investigating it. I saw a million doctors. Turns out that's super triggering when you have pelvic pain in terms of like flaring you. I was getting all the tests. I was seeing all the gynos. I was seeing, at a certain point I flew to another state to see a urologist. I went down, there's this rabbit hole of embedded UTI infections. So people say that like UTI bacteria can get caught in your biofilms in your bladder and not show up on standard tests. So I was spending $1 gajillion on doing these like mRNA testing to like whatever. I'd get the results back. It would be like, you have E. coli in your bladder, and I would get sent into a whole nother flare.
Of course.
I did months of antibiotics. I mean, I would have done, if they were like, we need to remove your bladder, I might have considered it. Like that's how much pain I was in. And I bring up the COVID thing and the being alone and the anxiety because it was a part of this perfect storm that kind of like bred my pain, if that makes sense. So at the end of last year, my friend at the time showed me this woman's Instagram profile. So this was almost exactly a year ago. And she showed me this woman, Nicole Sachs, who started this program called The Cure for Chronic Pain. And she is incredible. She has a story of chronic back pain, which very much falls into this category.
Mm-hmm.
And basically her whole thing, and she worked with this man, Dr. John Sarno, who is like the person that started this whole mind-body medicine movement. And he's passed, and so she has kind of like continued his work because he helped heal her. She had chronic back pain, and she believes in this thing called TMS, tension myelitis syndrome. And essentially what that is your body creating chronic conditions and pain because it would rather feel physical pain than the emotions that are underlying. Now, this TMS tends to impact people who are perfectionistic, overachiever, type A, everything in order, like us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I fell right into that category. I also then thought back on other areas of my life, and I'm like, I used to get diverticulitis, and then that went away. And
What's
then
that?
It's like it's disgusting. It's like pockets in your intestine fill up and then get infected, and you have like horrible pain, and you have to go on a bunch of antibiotics.
Oh God, okay.
I was getting that like every 3 months for a while, and then it went away. And then I started getting a rash on my face, and then that went away. And then the pelvic pain happened. And it's very much this TMS thing being at work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started doing her work, which is very simple. I read her book and I did her course. Highly recommend. And I started doing her daily practice, which is called Journal Speak, which is a 20-minute, one time a day journal dump that's not like morning pages. It's not like just writing about what happened today. It is a complete unleashing of everything you're feeling inside that you want nobody else to hear or see.
So it's ugly.
It's really ugly. You're swearing. You're saying you hate things and people. It's bad. But like the way that Nicole talks about it is we have this like steam valve, and at a certain point it gets full, and that's when the conditions start. And this allows the steam to come out of the valve and like lessen, right? So like our cup is overflowing, and we're kind of like letting some of the air out.
I have a question on this because I go back and forth on this, where part of me wants to just fucking let it rip. And that's very much how I used to be, not to a journal, but to people in my life, which is not positive. I'm very well aware of that. But I wonder if this happens to you because of the other type of work that we do. I have this fear, whether it's real or not, that if I speak like this or put this negativity into words, then am I giving it a place to live? Does that make sense?
Totally.
Like, am I focusing on the negative? What is it? Like, you are the world, your world is the words that you say, that kind of thing. If I'm saying all of this, is it then going to continue? Am I putting the negative energy out there? Do you ever feel that way?
I totally get it. I actually didn't deal with that fear, but people ask me that every single day on Instagram. So it's super common.
So I'm not alone.
Yeah. Everyone, like my Patreon is lit up with that question.
Yeah.
And I think that is a mechanism of your body trying to stay in the discomfort.
Okay.
Being like, this could hurt me. Or, you know what I mean? I think also that it has to do with the emotion that we attach to the actual work. So I view this journal speak as my literal medicine. I put it above all else. I am a slave to it. I will do it even if it's at 2 a.m. If I get home from being out, like I will get it done. And that's because I view it in such a positive light, even though what's coming out during it can feel and be so negative. Okay. So I think it has a lot to do with the way that you attach yourself to it.
Yeah. Almost like you're releasing the energy. You're not putting it out into the universe, but you're like putting it in a trash can.
Because by the way, those words and those feelings are going to exist within you regardless.
Agreed.
You're not protecting yourself from that. Those are real thoughts and feelings that are happening throughout your day. And I would personally rather put them on paper and then rip it up, which is part of the ritual.
Oh, so you rip it up.
I do.
Okay, well then that honestly changes everything for me.
You rip it up, and people love that because there's no risk in someone reading it, because no one should ever read your journal speak. And it's also like, I put this out there, and then there's like almost like a a ritual around being like, it's now destroyed.
Yeah. This brings up such a funny memory, but in college, when at one point Joe and I were broken up, and we like weren't really speaking, but we got in this like text fight, drunk at like 3 a.m, where it was like, why are we even doing this when we're not supposed to be talking? And I just wanted to go off on him, but I realized that like that wouldn't help anyone. So I'd send this long, scathing text message to one of my best friends as if I was sending it to him. But I forgot to include the like, this is meant for Joe, but I'm sending it to you. And Danny, if she's listening to this, she's like such a hypersensitive, like, are you mad at me? I'm sorry. Like always apologizing, always asking if I'm mad at her. It's like an ongoing joke between us where I'm like, do not ask me, do not apologize. And she woke up and like ran up to my room and was like, what did I do last night? And I was like, what are you talking about? So I sent my journal speak to her.
I'm dead.
And I'm like, I realized that I should have provided context instead of just ripping you a fucking new one thinking it was Joe.
I love that. Well, first of all, I love that that happened because it's hilarious. And I also love that you were like doing your own version of journal speak many years ago.
I do this a lot. And I do it like in DMs too sometimes.
Totally.
Like if I want to just tear into someone in response to what they said to me, my therapist is always like, text it to yourself. Do not engage. And I'm like, but I have so much to say. She's like, so send it to someone else that won't see it. So I text myself.
Great. It's about the release.
It totally agree. And after this practice, what happened to your pain?
So it's gone.
That's incredible.
I get little flickers here and there, and I now view it as okay, got it. Haven't been doing my journal speak, or something's happening this week that's stressing me out, and I need to like take some more time for myself. So there is no longer literally any fear attached to my pelvic pain. I used to be riddled with, will I feel like this forever?
Of course.
Is this some sort of crazy infection? I mean, my brain would go to cancer. Like fear was at the root of the pain, and then it was also exacerbating it. And now that fear is completely gone, and that has been like 90% of the battle. Right? It's the same reason why when I would get test results back, like from like a urine test, and I would be having a completely pain-free day, and then I would be riddled with pain and like real physical, like I was having like a full reaction. And that's where people are like, if I'm having chronic UTIs and yeast infections, so like that's an infection, like how does this, the stress and the emotions and all of that can even lower your immune system and make you more infection prone. So people get very caught up on like, you know, the back abnormalities, but my doctor sees that there is a bulging disc. If we had both of our backs scanned, there would be shit. So it's also this concept of when you're looking for something, you'll find something.
Well, that's where I think we relate on the health anxiety.
Yeah.
And I know back when we were seeing Dr. Beth, for example, I feel like I had hit a point where I was seeking for something, and I did just want answers, but then I felt like no matter what, I wanted more. And there is such a fine line of sometimes you just gotta stop searching, okay? Yes. Like when you feel okay, stop searching. But I go on the hamster wheel anxiety of like UTIs being an example. If I go to the bathroom and I feel the slightest thing, I'm like, oh my fucking God, oh my fucking God. And then I almost convince myself.
Which, by the way, you can.
Into
you can
a
manifest
UTI.
The symptoms.
No, like like
even talking about it right now, I'm like, do I feel it?
I used to be riddled with UTIs. And then I'm going to bed. This is honestly something that's happened now since having children that I'm working through. For instance, my toddler is sick and he got sick on Monday. So then going to bed Monday night, I'm like, my whole entire week is shot because now I'm going to get sick, or my baby's going to get sick, or Joe's going to get sick and he's not going to be able to do the 3 nights this week that he's doing with them because I have stuff. So I'm not going to be able to go to work. I should text Elizabeth and cancel our recordings. Like I spy roll. And then I wake up the next day and I'm like, oh, everyone's fine. Isn't that so fucking interesting?
And it's like, wow, I just wasted sleep, energy,
all
thoughts.
All of it.
Yeah.
In terms of anxiety, a lot of our conversations have talked about medication and all of the different things and the ups and the downs. Where are you at right now with your mental health?
I love this question. I'm in a great place with my mental health.
Amazing.
That came with a lot of work and self-realizations and honesty. And I recently, so I went on medication for the very first time last summer. Okay. So summer of 23. I felt great. Big improvements. Had those moments that you and I talk about where it's like, wow, other people have been living like this. Yeah. Like, what?
What the fuck?
All of a sudden I was like interested in my work and I was running around and I was cooking dinner and none of it felt like a drag. It was like so crazy. I got a little cocky. And
as we all do.
Yeah, I was like, this medication actually hasn't been doing anything. This is like me work. You know, I've done all this work on myself and I don't need it. And so I just like I weaned myself off. I didn't cold turkey. And I should also add that I'm taking a very small dose. My body is,
We're both
no surprise,
highly
very sensitive to
Same.
medication. And so I was able to wean myself off this summer, and I didn't put that much weight on it, admittedly. And then around mid-August, about a month after, so like it wore off, I started to be like, I don't feel energized and I don't feel good and I don't want to do anything, and like I want to nap in the middle of the day. And I had this realization that A, it was because of the medication, and B, for the first time in my life, I really looked it in the face of like, I've been dealing with depression. There's anxiety here, undoubtedly, but there's also depression, and it was really heartbreaking for me to realize that that had been something I had felt my entire life.
Yeah, I feel that.
Like this low grade lowness that I just assumed everybody else shared. And one of the biggest things that I remember from going off of medication most recently is summer ended and I came back to the city, and I was all of a sudden like dreading the weekends. And this is how I used to feel for my whole life, other than that year-long window of being on medication, because the weekend felt like this blank canvas of like having to fill with social activity that I didn't feel like I had the battery for, but then I also felt really shitty about spending time alone. So it was this like horrible, looming, sad, bad feeling, and I was like, oh my God. And so I started the medication again, and I feel great, no surprise. And I have just had to sit with, and this has taken me a lot of like time and work to be like, I'm someone who tries to live in a pretty natural lifestyle. I take very minimal medication. I take really good care of myself, and I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about requiring a medication. And even being on it, I sort of had it. Even like before this summer, I was like, yeah, it just like kind of felt a little like shameful or embarrassed about it, even though I knew it was helping. And I have just come to terms with, it makes me feel better, and I literally don't care. Like I have to feel good, and it has almost immediately impacted my relationships, impacted my work. I feel inspired. I feel excited. I'm so grateful for it.
I mean, for me, I think of it so much as like a biochemistry aspect. Like my body just needs a certain thing that maybe other people don't.
Totally.
And that has always been my feeling around medication. Like I'm on sertraline, which is like Zoloft, and then I'm on, what the fuck is the name of my ADHD medicine? Strattera.
Okay.
I'm on Strattera, which is more of a recent diagnosis and prescription that has changed my life in such incredible ways. But I fully feel that some of us just need extra assistance.
Totally.
And I relate to you on my brain naturally goes to the depressive. I hate that. I don't like that. I hate to admit it, but that's where it goes. And would it be wonderful for it not to? Of course, obviously.
Yeah.
But if I need an extra tool to get me to that place so that it's not looming in that depressive state, then I will take that 10 out of 10 times. And I get so many messages of like, well, how long do you think you're going to be on it? However fucking long I need.
So many of those messages.
I don't care if I'm on this until the day I die.
Literally doesn't matter. Have to feel good.
Like, and I'm never going into something thinking like, well, am I going to? Nope. I stayed on it through both my pregnancies, both my postpartums. Like,
I was going to ask that when we chat for mine. Okay, great to know.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm like so loud and proud about that. And I get so many messages about it. It wasn't an option for me at all. So I fully support anyone who's out there talking about their journey and how some of us just need some extra help. I want to close with the segment we do of filling your cup. I am such a proponent of finding time for yourself to fill your own cup, and I know that it's something you love doing too.
Totally.
So how do you fill your cup as granular as you can get?
I love alone time. Same. And alone time is very different when I'm medicated, because alone time when I'm feeling depressed is a whole different thing. Yep. So I mean intentional alone time. I love cooking a healthy meal for myself. It's not complicated. I make pasta or meatballs, and I watch The Real Housewives, or I do some To Be Magnetic work, which is like the manifestation program that Kim and I do. And I just love being like in my home by myself and just like enjoying the me time that I was saying like is why I had such an approach to dating of like, I'm just really happy doing what I'm doing.
Totally.
You know, I like love those kind of nights. So it's a simple answer. But like, that's just what came to my mind when you said that, because it's filling my cup, but it's also charging my batteries.
And that's huge. Do you consider yourself an introvert?
Yes.
You do?
Totally.
Isn't that interesting with the work you do, though?
Yes. So, yes.
Because I think I'm an introverted extrovert.
Yes. And like, I've toyed with that, and then I'm like, no, I think I'm just an introvert. Because conversations like this is charging my batteries. So maybe I am a hybrid, but it's like situations where I'm comfortable and we're talking about things that I'm passionate about, very different than like being at a 12-person birthday dinner doing small talk.
Okay.
That's an immediate battery drain.
Interesting.
So I'm just very particular about the socializations that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And by the way, I bend. You know, I do things that I have to do.
But I don't think it's like so specific for every single situation.
Yeah.
But I think about that a lot because I don't know. I'm always confused by myself because nothing charges my battery like being alone. But I love being with people and I fill my time with people. And like I will walk into a party and have so much fun, but then I'll leave and I'm like, no one talked to me for a day.
Totally.
So I don't know. I don't know what I am. Okay, well, I'm so happy that I got to sit down with you. And I mean, I know I get to sit down with you. And I feel like we have our like every 3 to 4 week coffee date and then voice note regularity.
Totally.
To keep us consistent. But it's nice to sit down and have like this type of conversation. For people who want more of you, where can they best support you?
So I would love if you would listen to my podcast.
Yeah.
It's called The Wellness Process. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as on Instagram at The Wellness Process Pod, and TikTok newly, which I'm trying to get a little bit more into.
No, but I tell you, I know I text you this all the time, but like your ability to go viral, I don't mean, I hope you don't ever take offense when I say that.
No,
Do you?
I'm so deeply complimented.
It's mind-blowing, Elizabeth. Mind-blowing. Like
Thank
what
you.
you've built is really incredible in such a fast turnaround. Like it's so expanding for me. I'm not gonna lie to you, I have to turn off the competitive side of my brain being like, don't compare.
Get it.
Where I'm just like so excited for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And it's all manifestation.
I believe it.
Back to this, like just finishing on one more TBM mention, like I had all of these things on my list for manifestation. Even like I put on there 250,000 followers on Instagram for the podcast, which I knew was like an egregious thing. And I'm at like 190 today.
That's insane.
Which doesn't make any sense.
No, but it's insane.
It actually doesn't make sense.
Like,
I woke up this morning, I'm like, this is witchcraft.
Insane.
The work works. I'm not special. Anyone can do this. The work works.
Okay, but wait, sorry, where else can they find you?
So that, and then my other business is called Sweats in the City on Instagram, and we review all things fitness, wellness, beauty. And then my personal account is Eliza End, ELIZAEND, outfits, things like that. It's a little bit less of like a to-do, but you know.
Wait a second, my mind is blown that you said Eliza End.
So
because in my head it's Eliz and.
It is.
Like that's what I always think when I go to tag you or like look at anything.
One of my things that I talked about on this Patreon of surprising things about me is no one ever knows what to call me, which is such an interesting problem.
What do people call
me
you?
Eliz.
Okay.
My middle name starts with an A, and the last 3 letters of my last name are End. So I say Eliza End because like I'm putting it all together in one, but it's like it's Eliz A.
What do you introduce yourself as? Elizabeth?
Usually Elizabeth, but like friends or anyone who is down to call me this, call me Eliz, which I know is like not.
What about
really...
E?
Yeah, people call me E.
Because I feel like I sometimes call you E.
I love E.
Elizabeth. Wow. Okay.
I'm like looking at Kim's face right now. She's still
I'm looking at
about
you,
the
but
handle.
you know what's, well, I'm not going to lie. For so long, I would call you and Dale the wrong name before we were friends because it was like your shared account and I would just be like, which one's Dale? Which one's Elizabeth? But when I look at you, I can't explain it. Elizabeth is not what comes to mind.
I think a lot of people have that problem. I don't know what it is.
I don't know what it is.
No one wants to call me my name. And it's a very strange phenomenon that I've dealt with my whole life.
That is
so here we are, just reintroducing myself.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I loved it.
I love you.
Love you.